When a Scorpio disappears, something sacred is happening. There's something unexplainable about the way a Scorpio disappears. Not in anger, not in fear, but in something much deeper, a ritual that even they may not fully understand, yet cannot deny. You don't hear a door slam. You don't get a warning. One day, their energy is gone. Not just physically, but spiritually. As if the thread that connected you has been pulled into another realm, and the world may call it distance, coldness, withdrawal. But the truth? When a Scorpio chooses to be alone, they are not abandoning you, they are returning to themselves. You see, Scorpio is not like the other signs. They don't enjoy solitude the way an introvert might enjoy a night in. No. For Scorpio, being alone is a sacred space, a spiritual necessity. It's where their intuition sharpens, where their wounds bleed in private, where their soul whispers the truths they could never hear through the noise of the world. And if you've ever loved a Scorpio, or been one, you know exactly what I mean. Because the moment you try to force closeness, the more they retreat. Not out of cruelty, but protection. Their alone time isn't a rejection of others. It's a protection of self. The most powerful transformations in a Scorpio's life, they don't happen on stage. They happen in silence, in shadow, in the midnight hours when no one is watching, and especially when no one is allowed in. And that is exactly what we're going to uncover in today's video. Not just why Scorpio likes to be alone, but what that solitude really means for their spirit, their healing, and their destiny. Because each moment of aloneness is not a retreat, it's a rebirth. So don't go anywhere, because what I'm about to share may change the way you see Scorpio forever. And if you are a Scorpio, this will remind you why your silence is your sanctuary, not your shame. Reason 1, because their soul speaks in silence. Have you ever watched a Scorpio fall into silence, not out of anger, but out of necessity? They don't announce it, they don't explain it. They simply begin to drift inward, like a tide pulling away from the shore. And if you're not paying attention, you might think they're ignoring you. You might assume they're shutting down, hiding something, being cold. But the truth is far more sacred. Scorpios go silent because that is when their soul finally begins to speak. See, the Scorpio soul isn't loud, it isn't frantic, it doesn't thrive in crowds or in constant conversations. It speaks in whispers, symbols, gut feelings, and visions that rise in the stillness, in the quiet hours when the world stops demanding and finally starts listening. For most people, silence feels empty, but for Scorpio, silence is full of meaning, full of memory, full of depth. It's where they process betrayal, where they replay every word spoken to them, not once, but 100 times, feeling each syllable vibrate in their chest. To Scorpio, stillness is not avoidance, it's investigation, revelation, resurrection. Many don't understand this because they've never been forced to live below the surface of things. But Scorpio? They were born in the depths. They live in the emotional underworld, and silence is their native tongue. I remember interviewing a Scorpio woman once, a trauma therapist from New Mexico. She told me the most powerful therapy she ever gave wasn't through talking, but through letting her clients sit with their own pain, in silence. She said, "Words distract, silence reveals." And that's exactly how she lived. She spent hours in the desert, no music, no phone, just the wind. It was there, she told me, that she learned the truth about her childhood, her heartbreaks, and most of all, her strength. And isn't that what makes Scorpio so powerful? They don't run from the voice within. They walk toward it, even if it leads them into fire. That's why they need to be alone, because only then can the voice of the soul rise above the noise of the world. So if a Scorpio you love has gone quiet, don't chase the silence away. Don't fill it with questions. Don't rush in to fix what you think is broken. Instead, honor their sacred space, because within that silence, something holy is unfolding. And when they return, they'll come back clearer, sharper, more truthful, with a fire in their eyes that only solitude could have lit. Lesson: silence isn't always a sign of distance. For Scorpio, it's a sign of alignment, a reconnection with their soul's deepest wisdom. Reason 2. Because they recharge in solitude, most people recharge through interaction, through laughter, conversation, social warmth. But Scorpio recharges in isolation, not because they're antisocial, but because they are energetically sensitive in ways the world often misjudges. See, what the outside world calls introversion doesn't even begin to describe what happens inside a Scorpio when they're around too many people for too long. It's not just overstimulation, it's energetic exhaustion. Every emotion in the room, they feel it. Every lie, they sense it. Every hidden motive, unspoken grudge, and shallow mask. It all sticks to them like static on silk. They may smile through it, they may even be the calmest person in the room, but inside, their nervous system is in overdrive, scanning, decoding, absorbing. So when they leave the party early or vanish after a long day of socializing, it's not because they're moody or cold. It's because they're drained in a way that can't be fixed by food or rest or Netflix. Only solitude will do, only sacred aloneness, where nothing is required of them and nothing is being taken from them, can restore their soul. I once spoke with a Scorpio man, a well-known energy healer in California. He told me that after each healing session, he would drive out to the cliffs above the Pacific Ocean and sit for hours in his truck, doing absolutely nothing. Why? Because during the sessions, he could feel every pain his clients carried, not just emotionally, but physically. He said, "People don't know what it costs us to feel that deeply, but if I don't spend time alone afterward, I lose myself in their wounds." That is the Scorpio dilemma. Their empathy is so profound, it can become a burden if they don't guard their energy. Solitude for Scorpio is not a luxury, it is maintenance, a recalibration of the spirit, a detox of the soul. And ironically, it's in that stillness that their greatest strengths begin to resurface, their intuition sharpens, their emotions stabilize, their truth becomes clearer, and most of all, their power returns. If you love a Scorpio, you must understand this. Their need to be alone isn't personal, it's primal. Trying to pull them back into the world before they're ready is like pulling a butterfly out of its cocoon before it's transformed. They will come back when their soul is full again. Lesson: true love is not just about presence, it's about allowing space. If you truly care for a Scorpio, let them disappear, so they can return fully charged, fully awake, and fully themselves. Reason 3. Because their energy is sensitive to fakeness. Scorpios don't just dislike fakeness, they can feel it. It hits them like static in their spirit, like a whisper that doesn't match the lips it comes from. A Scorpio can walk into a room where everyone is smiling and know instantly, something here is off. The laugh is too forced, the compliment too rehearsed, the energy contaminated. While others may shrug it off, play along, be polite, Scorpio cannot. They may smile, but inside, their shields are already up. Their soul already on alert. This is why Scorpio often chooses solitude over company, because being alone with truth is far more healing than being surrounded by pretenders. You see, Scorpio was never meant to live on the surface. Their soul is forged in depth, mystery, and authenticity. Anything less than real, even slightly off, burns through their nervous system like poison. And make no mistake, Scorpio's reaction to fakeness isn't just emotional, it's biological. Their energy field contracts, their stomach tightens, their jaw clenches. It's as if their body itself is rejecting the artificial. I once knew a Scorpio artist in New York City. She told me she couldn't stand networking events, not because she was shy, but because, in her words, I can smell fake ambition from across the room. She said everyone came with a smile, but left with secrets, and that kind of environment drained her faster than painting for 12 hours straight. So instead, she stayed home, worked alone, made her art in silence, surrounded only by things that didn't lie to her, candles, canvases, and the sound of her breath. She didn't miss the crowds. She missed herself when she was around them. This is the paradox of Scorpio. They crave connection, but only the soul-deep kind. Anything else? They'd rather be alone. And let's be honest, in today's world of curated personas, image management, and half-truths, how often does Scorpio find the kind of realness they long for? Not often. And that's why they retreat. Don't take it personally if a Scorpio chooses solitude. They're not running from people, they're running from performance, from forced laughs, from plastic smiles, from people who want their presence, but not their truth. Lesson: Scorpio's solitude isn't a rejection of the world, it's a rejection of falsehood. If you want to be close to a Scorpio, don't worry about being perfect. Just be real, because to them, realness is rarer and more sacred than gold. Reason 4, because they can hear their intuition clearer alone. For Scorpio, intuition isn't some vague gut feeling, it's a full-body frequency, a sensation that ripples through their chest, stirs in their stomach, and echoes in their bones. But here's the thing most people don't understand. That sacred voice, that radar so many envy, it can't be heard in noise. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And so, to truly hear it, Scorpio must be alone. They must turn down the volume of the world, the voices, the opinions, the endless distractions, so they can tune into something much older, much wiser, and far more accurate than logic, their inner knowing. Scorpios are ruled by Pluto, the planet of transformation, secrets, and deep soul truth. This gives them access to psychic layers most people never touch, but only when they protect that access through solitude. When Scorpio is around others too much, their senses become clouded. It's like trying to read the stars through city lights. The signal gets muffled. The instincts that were once razor sharp start to dull. And that's dangerous, not just for them, but for everyone around them. Because Scorpio's intuition is not just for their own guidance, it's how they protect, sense betrayal, see potential, and read energy that others miss entirely. I remember a Scorpio man, a paramedic from Detroit, who told me he always knew when a call was going to go wrong. Not based on the dispatcher's voice, not from the scene, but from a shift he felt in his chest before the call even came. He said, "I'd get this wave, like something invisible touched my spine. That's when I'd double-check my gear." He wasn't superstitious. He was precise. And every time he followed that gut feeling, he saved someone's life. But he also told me that when he didn't take time alone to reset, to clear that inner channel, he lost the signal. He stopped hearing it clearly, and mistakes followed. That's what solitude does for Scorpio. It resets their frequency. It sharpens the blade. It clears the static so the soul can speak without interference. It's not about hiding, it's about receiving. So, if you ever wonder why a Scorpio suddenly pulls away, it's not always because something's wrong. Sometimes it's because something important is trying to come through. And they know if they don't get quiet, they won't hear it. Lesson: the world may value noise and attention, but Scorpio finds truth in silence. If you want to understand a Scorpio's wisdom, honor their stillness. That's where their magic is born. Reason 5. Because alone time is their time of transformation. Scorpio isn't afraid of the dark. In fact, they go looking for it, while others run from discomfort, from change, from the unknown. Scorpio walks straight into it, willingly, silently, and often alone. Because for Scorpio, solitude is not just peaceful, it's alchemical. It is the sacred chamber where they burn away illusions, where they strip themselves down to the bones of their truth, where they let old identities die, so new ones can be born. This is not something they can do in public. It's not a process they can explain or even share. Because transformation for Scorpio is private, it's personal. It's a death and a rebirth that happens quietly, under the surface, like a volcano reshaping the earth before anyone sees the smoke. And here's what most people never realize. Every time a Scorpio disappears, they return different. Not because they were pretending before, but because they were evolving. Their solitude is not an escape. It's a cocoon, a sacred rite of passage where they face their shadows, confront their wounds, and decide, often alone, what version of themselves they're ready to become next. I once spoke to a Scorpio woman who had ended a 12-year marriage. She told no one where she was going. She packed a small bag, drove out to the Blue Ridge Mountains, and lived alone in a cabin for 3 months. No phone, no internet, just books, journals, and the wilderness. When she came back, she had cut off all her hair. She spoke differently. She moved differently. She was different. She told me, people thought I was falling apart, but I wasn't. I was molting, shedding, becoming. That is the essence of Scorpio. They don't cling to versions of themselves that no longer fit. They willingly dissolve them in solitude, even if it means enduring emotional storms no one else will ever see. Because Scorpio knows, true transformation doesn't happen in applause. It happens in the dark, in the alone, in the unseen. And when they re-emerge, they don't explain the scars. They don't narrate the pain. They simply embody the result. Stronger, sharper, wiser, reborn. Lesson: if you love a Scorpio, honor the times they retreat. They're not running from life. They're walking into the fire, so they can come back as someone the world hasn't met yet. Reason 6. Because they are protecting you from their intensity. If you've ever loved a Scorpio, you know this truth. Their presence can feel like a storm, magnetic, mysterious, consuming. But what few understand is that their solitude is sometimes an act of mercy. You see, Scorpio feels everything intensely. When they're hurt, it cuts to the bone. When they're angry, it shakes their entire energy field. When they're betrayed, it doesn't just sting, it haunts. And when these emotions rise to the surface, they don't always trust themselves to express them safely in front of others. So what do? They retreat, not to punish you, not to freeze you out, but to protect you. Scorpio knows their emotional fire can burn, and not everyone is built to withstand that heat. Alone, they can scream into the void. They can write until the ink runs dry. They can cry without explanation. They can feel everything without having to apologize for it. They are not weak. They are managing power. The power of rage, grief, longing, jealousy, and passion, all wrapped into one soul. And when that power builds up too high, Scorpio chooses silence over explosion, distance over destruction. I once met a Scorpio man, a veteran who had lost his brother in combat. He told me that when grief hit, he didn't want comfort. He didn't want words, he wanted space, because he was afraid of what might come out if he opened his mouth. He said, "I isolate so I don't say things I'll regret, not because I'm cold, but because I care." That's the paradox. When Scorpio pulls away, it's often because they love too deeply, not too little. They're trying not to drown you in the tidal wave they're carrying. They're trying not to pour their darkness into a space that can't hold it. And once they've processed it, once the water's calm and the fire settles, they come back. Not with apology, but with clarity, because in their solitude, they've sorted through their emotional labyrinth, and now they can love you without hurting you. Lesson: when Scorpio retreats, don't chase them, thank them, because that distance isn't rejection, it's restraint. It's emotional maturity dressed in silence. If you can hold space while they go inward, they will return to you more grounded, more powerful, and more capable of loving with depth and intention than ever before. Reason 7. Because they trust actions, not crowds. Scorpio doesn't follow the herd, they study it. They don't rush into groupthink or melt into a crowd just to feel safe. In fact, the more people gather, the more Scorpio steps back, not out of fear, but out of instinct. Because for them, truth isn't found in noise, it's revealed in patterns. They don't listen to what people say, they observe what people do, again and again, especially when no one's watching. And that level of perception, it requires distance, stillness, observation, solitude. Scorpio prefers to watch from the edges, where masks slip, where real motivations leak out between smiles. That's where they begin to see. You see, Scorpio doesn't just read energy, they read consistency. Anyone can put on an act for a few minutes, but over time, when Scorpio steps away and returns quietly, they're checking to see, did your actions match your words? Were you the same when I wasn't around? And this isn't suspicion, it's strategy. They've learned, often the hard way, that people reveal themselves in the long game, not the short one. I remember a Scorpio woman, a private investigator in Chicago. She told me she never confronted her targets immediately. She let them speak, smile, spin stories. Then she'd retreat, watch, track their routines. She said, "You learn more from silence than from questions." And that's exactly how Scorpio lives. They don't need confirmation in conversation. They find it in alignment, or the lack of it. This is why crowds exhaust them. There's too much energy, too much performance, too many signals to filter. And Scorpio isn't interested in the show. They're interested in the source, the root, the reality behind the curtain. So they retreat, not because they hate people, but because they want to understand them. And that can't happen when they're stuck in the middle of the noise. Lesson: Scorpio solitude isn't antisocial, it's investigative. They step back not to isolate, but to illuminate, to find what's real, to trace the truth beneath behavior. If you're wondering why a Scorpio is quiet, ask yourself this: what did your actions say when you thought they weren't watching? Because they were. Reason 8. Because they are not afraid to face their own darkness. Most people spend their lives running from their shadows. Scorpio walks toward theirs, with eyes wide open, heart exposed, and no flashlight but truth. It's one of the most misunderstood aspects of the Scorpio soul, They don't crave solitude because they're depressed. They crave it because it's the only space honest enough to confront what most people would rather bury. While the world covers its wounds with distractions, Scorpio rips off the bandage and stares directly into the wound. They know the darkness isn't the enemy. Denial is. In their quietest moments, Scorpio doesn't try to escape pain. They analyze it, dissect it, feel every inch of it, again and again, until they've understood the lesson it came to teach. That kind of bravery, it can't happen in a crowd. It can't happen while keeping up appearances. It only happens in solitude. Alone is where Scorpio meets their demons and makes them speak. It's where they walk back through childhood wounds, where they replay old betrayals, not to torment themselves, but to extract wisdom. I once met a Scorpio man, a former addict turned counselor. He told me the turning point in his recovery wasn't rehab or therapy or even hitting rock bottom. It was a single night alone in his apartment, staring at himself in the mirror. He said, "I saw everything I hated, but for the first time, I didn't flinch." He spent the next 12 hours writing letters, not to others, but to the parts of himself he had abandoned. He burned them all at dawn. He told me that night I wasn't healing, I was reclaiming. That is what Scorpio does in solitude. They reclaim their power, not by ignoring pain, but by integrating it. They understand something the rest of the Zodiac often forgets. You can't ascend until you've faced your descent. You can't become whole if you're still hiding from half of yourself. So when Scorpio chooses to be alone, it's not weakness, it's spiritual warriorship. They are cleansing not just their mind, but their soul, not for the world, but for themselves. Lesson: don't fear the Scorpio who disappears. Honor them. Because while others numb, avoid, and blame, Scorpio goes into the fire to burn away everything false. And when they return, they are not broken. They are reborn, forged in the flames of truth. Reason 9. Because they observe and decode without distraction, Scorpios are not passive people, but they do prefer to watch before they act, and to truly observe the world, not just glance at it, but read it, decode it, understand its hidden patterns. They need space, they need silence, they need solitude. Because Scorpio isn't watching for entertainment, they're watching for truth. Every eyebrow raise, every nervous laugh, every pause between words. Scorpio picks up on it. They are natural lie detectors, emotional detectives, energetic X-rays. But here's the catch. This level of perception comes with a price: focus. And the one thing that weakens that focus? Distraction. When Scorpio is surrounded by noise, by small talk, flashing screens, shallow energy, it dulls their edge. It scatters the signals they're trying to pick up on. And that, to Scorpio, feels like walking blindfolded through a minefield. So what do? They retreat. Not because they're antisocial, but because their spiritual instrument, their perception, needs recalibration. Alone, Scorpio sees more clearly. They sense people's motives with chilling accuracy. They notice contradictions others ignore. They watch the story behind the words. And more importantly, what's missing between the lines. I once spoke to a Scorpio woman, a criminal psychologist in Texas. She told me her most accurate assessments of suspects came not in the interrogation room, but during her long walks alone afterward. She'd replay their body language, the way their eye twitched when they mentioned a name, the silence that followed a specific question. She said, "I don't hear truth in answers. I hear it in hesitation." And she could only catch that pattern when no one else was around. That's the Scorpio gift. They don't just see what you show, they see what you hide. But to stay sharp, they need distance. Solitude is their command center. It's where the puzzle pieces fall into place, where they zoom out and make sense of chaos, where they decide who's real, who's lying, and what move comes next. Lesson: Scorpio's time alone isn't passive, it's powerful, it's strategic. If a Scorpio is quiet, they're not sleeping, they're studying. And when they re-enter the room, you better believe they've already figured out far more than you think. Reason 10. Because love to them is spiritual, not social. To Scorpio, love is not a performance. It's not public. It's not something you showcase on social media or prove at parties. It's sacred. It's soul level. It's something they feel in silence, long before they say a word. Scorpio doesn't fall in love casually. They don't flirt for the fun of it. When they love, it's a transfusion, an energetic merging of depth, memory, desire, fear, and loyalty. So when the world demands that love be loud and visible, Scorpio often retreats. Not because they don't feel love, but because they feel it too deeply to dilute it with surface expectations. To Scorpio, real love is spiritual. It's a bond that exists even in absence. It's the kind of connection that doesn't need constant contact to stay alive. In fact, it often grows stronger in stillness, when each soul can breathe on its own, yet still feel the other. This is why Scorpio loves in private. They don't need to parade their relationship to prove it exists. They'd rather show you their loyalty in small, unseen ways, the protection you never asked for, the secrets they never betray, the way they remember things you said once and never repeated. And when they're alone, that love doesn't fade, it intensifies. Because solitude is when they reflect. It's when they go back and relive every conversation, every glance, every emotional shift, not to overthink, but to understand the depth of their own heart. I remember a Scorpio man who told me he didn't say, "I love you," for the first 3 years of his relationship. Not because he didn't feel it, but because he believed those words should only be spoken when you're ready to carry the soul of the person you love. He said, "I wanted to be sure it wasn't just emotion. I wanted it to be spiritual commitment." That's how Scorpio loves. Not with noise, not with fanfare, but with depth, with intention, with eternity in their eyes. And that kind of love, it needs solitude, not to hide, but to deepen. Because Scorpio understands what many forget. Love isn't measured by how often you talk. It's measured by how deeply you feel when there's silence. Lesson: if a Scorpio loves you, don't panic when they go quiet. That may be when they're loving you the most, not with words, but with soul recognition. Reason 11. Because alone, they hear the universe. Speak, there are moments in life when the outside world becomes too loud, the opinions, the expectations, the endless noise. Most people turn up their distractions to drown it out. But Scorpio, they turn everything off. Because they know, to truly hear the universe, you must be quiet enough to notice the whispers. And that's exactly why Scorpio often chooses solitude. To others, it may look like isolation, but to Scorpio, it's communion. It's in those quiet hours, when no one is texting, no one is calling, no one is needing anything, that the Scorpio soul feels closest to what's real. They sit in silence, and the wind begins to speak. A flicker of candlelight feels like a message. A sudden thought, sharp, clear, feels like a divine nudge. And the emotion rising from their chest, that's not just their own feeling, it's a download from something higher. Scorpio has always had a spiritual ear, but it's not tuned to sermons or lectures. It's tuned to vibration, to symbolism, to what lives beneath the surface of this world and only rises when the noise dies. I remember a Scorpio woman, a spiritual medium from Arizona. She said she never received clear guidance when she was with others, only when she fasted from conversation, turned off the lights, and sat cross-legged in her garden at 3 a.m. That's when the universe spoke, not in English, not in visions, but in presence, in feeling, in knowing. She told me, "Solitude is my sacred channel. I can't hear God over the sound of social media." Scorpio understands this deeply. There are truths that only arrive in solitude, answers that only show up when you're still enough to receive them, and clarity that only emerges when you stop trying to understand and start allowing yourself to simply be. This is why Scorpio disappears. Not to escape the world, but to connect with something bigger than the world. They are not just retreating, they are receiving, tuning in, being reborn through silence. Listen, don't assume Scorpio is lost when they're quiet. They might be closer to truth than they've ever been, because in the solitude they choose, they don't just hear their own soul, they hear the universe answering back. Reason 12. Because isolation is not loneliness, it's power. Most people confuse solitude with suffering. They hear alone and immediately think abandoned, unwanted, broken. But Scorpio knows better. Scorpio understands that true power is not found in the crowd. It's found in the quiet. It's in the moments when you are stripped of distractions, when no one is applauding, when there are no mirrors but your own reflection. That's when you discover who you really are. And Scorpio was born for that discovery. They don't fear being alone. They embrace it because they know there is a version of themselves that only reveals itself in silence, a version no one gets to see. Not because Scorpio is hiding, but because not everyone is ready. In isolation, Scorpio doesn't weaken. They sharpen, they focus, they rebuild, they remember their worth, realign with their mission, reconnect with their ancestors, and reclaim every piece of themselves they once gave away. And the beauty? They do it without needing permission, without needing to explain, without needing a stage. They don't just survive alone, they become invincible alone. I once knew a Scorpio musician who would vanish before every album release. His label hated it, his fans panicked, but he told me, "If I don't isolate, I create from pressure. When I go quiet, I create from truth." That's the Scorpio code. Pull back, go dark, go deep, not to disappear, but to return with power the world can't touch. You see, for Scorpio, isolation is not emptiness, it's a womb, a forge, a sacred temple where transformation happens in private, so that the world only sees the final flame, never the fire that built it. Lesson: never mistake Scorpio's solitude for sadness. It's their sanctuary, their reset, their rise. And when they walk out of it, they don't need to explain who they've become. Their energy will say it all. Final reflection: Scorpio's sacred aloneness, a temple, not a prison. So now you know Scorpio's love for solitude is not a weakness. It's not coldness. It's not arrogance. It's a sacred rhythm, a soul pattern, a return to source. For every moment they disappear, they are healing, shedding, becoming. While the world rushes forward, craving connection, attention, noise, Scorpio steps back, not because they don't care, but because they care so deeply, they must make space for the truth to breathe. Alone is not lonely for Scorpio. It is where their spirit gets clean, where their pain speaks honestly, where their power regrows from the ashes of yesterday's version of themselves. And if you are a Scorpio, you already know this in your bones. The urge to retreat is not avoidance, it's realignment. It's your soul reminding you that your greatest clarity comes not from others, but from yourself. And if you love a Scorpio, let them be. Let them go quiet. Let them wander into their darkness. Because what they'll return with is something no one else could ever bring you, a clearer version of themselves, a deeper kind of love, a power forged in places most people are too afraid to go. Scorpio doesn't vanish to punish. They vanish to protect, to purify, to transform. So the next time a Scorpio goes silent, don't panic, don't chase, just whisper to yourself, something sacred is happening. And when they come back, you'll see it in their eyes, a fire that was born in the dark, and a soul that never forgot who they were, even when no one was watching. If this message touched something in you, whether you're a Scorpio or you love one, this is your space. The path to Buddha wisdom is where we honor the silence, the soul, and the sacred journey of transformation. So don't just watch, subscribe, comment, and let the world know you're not afraid of the dark, because neither is Scorpio, and in that darkness, they rise.